Welcome back. We have a completely custom-tailored deep dive lined up for you today. And I have to say, the stack of sources you provided for this one is just, well, it's wildly fascinating.
Oh, yeah, it really is. It's quite the pile.
It is March 4, 2026, and today we are looking at a pile of material that, at first glance, seems to have absolutely zero
Yeah,
overlap.
right. None whatsoever.
On one side of the desk, we have a pristine, archived copy of the British indie music magazine NME from exactly 20 years ago. February 18th, 2006.
Classic era.
And sitting right next to it is a hyper-dense, modern metaphysical manifesto written by an author named Athonix. And get this, Athonix wrote it in collaboration with an AI they refer to as a super amplia for analyzer.
Yeah, that is a phenomenal juxtaposition. I mean, we are looking at two entirely different eras, written in completely different languages of culture. One is grounded in the scent of stale beer, sweat amplifiers, and tabloid headlines.
Yeah.
And the other is steeped in quantum physics, cosmic frequencies, and the fundamental nature of human existence.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission for this deep dive is to explore two very different types of rebellion.
Exactly.
First, we have the visceral, guitar-smashing world of mid-2000s indie rock fame. And second, a mind-bending futuristic theory about hacking the fundamental frequencies of the universe itself. So let's transport ourselves back to 2006.
Let's do it.
The music scene is raw, it's chaotic, and according to this issue of NME, it is incredibly physical.
You really have to look at what those bands were reacting against to understand the sheer force of that 2006 moment.
Right.
This entire era was defined by artists bucking the manufactured, highly polished pop machine of the late 90s and early 2000s. The rebellion here wasn't theoretical, it was tangible.
Very much so.
Athonix might write about cosmic frequencies, but these bands were trying to change the frequency of culture with loud guitars and absolute defiance. Take the specific examples in the magazine.
Oh, the Pete Doherty story.
Yes. You have Pete Doherty of Baby Shambles facing a very real prison sentence at Ealing Magistrates Court for multiple drug charges.
The quintessential rock star in trouble with the law scenario.
Exactly. But look at his reaction. He manages to avoid jail, receiving a 12-month community order and drug rehab instead.
Right.
And rather than laying low or issuing a polished PR statement, he immediately heads over to a London pub, the Boogaloo Bar, and plays a triumphant, impromptu acoustic gig for his fans.
I love that detail. It's so immediate. It's a complete rejection of the sanitized corporate game.
It really is.
And then you have Mike Skinner from the streets.
Yeah.
He's taking that same rebellious energy, but channeling it into satire. He's filming a music video for the song When You Wasn't Famous, set inside an actual rehab clinic.
Which is a direct jab at the tabloid culture that was obsessed with catching musicians at their lowest.
Yeah, precisely. Or look at Belle and Sebastian. In 2006, they are celebrating 10 years as a cult band with their album The Life Pursuit. The magazine points out how they famously beat Pete Waterman's manufactured pop group Steps for a Brit Award back in 1999, which was an upset that completely shocked the traditional music industry.
And my absolute favorite part of their story in this source is the contrast. You have this beloved, slightly twee indie pop band, and yet they notoriously got arrested for drunkenly trespassing, urinating on the set of the British soap opera EastEnders.
It totally shatters the pristine image the industry usually demands.
Exactly. And the fans were matching that exact same frenzied, rule-breaking energy. It wasn't just the bands rebelling. The audience was starved for something authentic.
Imagine being a music fan back then, constantly spoon-fed, focus-grouped pop groups. When something real came along, the reaction was explosive.
The fan frenzy described in the source is staggering. The magazine details how the Arctic Monkeys had just broken a massive sales record previously held by the pop group Hearsay.
Right, they sold 350,000 copies of their debut album in week one.
Which is a monumental shift in cultural power. The demand for tickets was causing absolute chaos across the country.
There's this one anecdote in there that really stuck with me. Picture yourself as this specific fan. You've been queuing in the freezing cold for 5 hours.
Oh yeah, the voucher story.
Yeah. The venue gives you a physical voucher, number 187, to prevent line cutting for an allocation of 400 tickets.
Yeah.
You've done the math, you were guaranteed a spot.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow, inexplicably, when you get to the front of the line, the tickets are gone. Just a complete computer says no moment. The raw passion and the intense anger of that fan is palpable through the pages. It's a very physical friction against a broken system.
And you see that same intensity bleeding over backstage, too. The text covers the massive Enemy Awards tour, which was basically a traveling circus of this exact cultural moment.
The stories from that tour are wild.
You have Paul Smith of Maximo Park performing with such aggressive, unbridled passion that his hands literally bled on stage. That is the physical toll of this rebellion.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the American band We Are Scientists brought their own brand of eccentric discipline to the tour. They put up a strict flip chart banning dogs from their dressing room because apparently dogs eat shoes.
Which is just incredible tour logic.
It is. And then you have the Mystery Jets treating their backstage area like a collaborative hippie den, making it their own communal space wherever they went.
It was all about raw, physical human connection and completely defying the mainstream pop rulebook. They were building their own microcultures in every venue they played.
Exactly.
So we've seen how these bands hacked the cultural frequency with guitars, attitude, and a refusal to play along.
Mm-hmm.
But what if you took that exact same impulse, the need to break out of a manufactured system, and applied it not just to the music industry, but to the actual laws of physics?
That is quite the pivot.
It is, but it brings us to the second batch of sources you shared, the writings of Ethonics.
To even approach Ethonics' worldview, the manifesto states you need to adopt what is called the beginner perspective shift, or BPS. This is heavily rooted in both Buddhist philosophy, specifically the concept of beginner's mind, and cognitive psychology. BPS requires completely letting go of all your preconceptions, your biases, and everything you think you know about reality.
You have to embrace a totally open, curious mindset.
Yes, and accept the possibility that the universe doesn't operate the way textbooks claim it does.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because once you adopt that mindset, Ethonics introduces the core equation of his manifesto. It's called the imagination statement. The equation itself is incredibly simple. I equals T times F. Imagination equals truth multiplied by freedom. But Ethonics claims that everything in our universe, every physical law we observe, was actually created by someone else's imagination. Can you walk me through what he means when he says imagination acts as a boundary condition for the waveform of our reality?
It's a staggering concept. Think of reality not as a solid fixed thing, but as a sea of pure potential, a waveform.
Okay.
Ethonics argues that human imagination is the mechanism that collapses that wave into solid reality. The boundary condition just means the limits or the edges of what is possible. So if our collective imagination is constrained, our reality is constrained.
But Ethonics doesn't just leave it as abstract philosophy. I saw this elaborate auditing system in the notes. He attempts to actually measure the truth of this reality using something called the Veracity Perspective System, or VPS.
Yes, the VPS.
It's designed to assign any concept a probability score from 0 to 100, where 100 means an idea is absolutely true and positive for the future survival of our species.
The mechanics of that system are fascinating. The VPS calculates this score based on 5 self-correcting variables, which the text calls Botanhebs.
So how does a philosophical system actually calculate truth? What are these 5 variables?
Let's walk through them. First is truth, which Ethonics anchors in set theory and logical coherence. Essentially, this means a statement must be structurally sound and non-contradictory within its own logic.
Got it.
Second is knowledge, which grounds the idea in the scientific method. Can it be observed and tested?
Okay, so logic and science. Pretty standard so far.
Then it gets more philosophical. The third Botanheb is empathy, which is based on what he calls the sovereignty principle.
Which means?
This means the concept must actively minimize negative consequences for all conscious beings. It cannot cause harm. Fourth is empowerment, evaluating whether the idea provides people with the tools to act freely rather than restricting or controlling them.
Right.
And finally, enlightenment, which measures if the concept serves the evolutionary goal of advancing consciousness itself.
So you run an idea, any idea, through truth, knowledge, empathy, empowerment, and enlightenment, and it spits out a score.
Exactly.
But why do we even need this system? Well, it brings us to the central conflict in Ethonics' universe. He claims we don't live in a natural universe at all. We live in a constructed artificial reality called the terrarium. And this terrarium is ruled by a system of falsality.
Because every rebellion needs a villain. And in this metaphysical framework, they are the denialists.
The denialists.
Yes. The manifesto describes these antagonists using what it calls the vampire protocol. These are parasitic entities that literally feed on human suffering.
The source material calls this energy louche, right?
Yes, louche. Think about how stressed you feel. checking your email or watching the news or sitting in traffic. According to Athonics, the denialists keep humanity perpetually stressed, sick, and fearful because that low-frequency emotional vibration, that loosh, is their food source.
Wow.
And to maintain this power dynamic, they hoard advanced technologies away from the masses, keeping us trapped in a cycle of suffering and short lifespans.
And this is where the manifesto makes some highly specific, real-world claims about what exact technology is being hoarded. Now, it's worth reminding you, we are just the messengers here unpacking Athonics' worldview.
Absolutely. We are just looking at the source text.
He specifically takes aim at the modern tech industry. The text claims that age reversal technology already exists today. It cites epigenetic chemical cocktails that can essentially reset the age of our cells and telomere lengthening achieved via hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
Right. Epigenetics being the study of how behaviors and environment can cause changes that affect the way your genes work. The claim here is that the elites have figured out how to use chemical compounds to tell those genes to revert to a youthful state.
But according to Athonics, this isn't being shared. He argues it is being hoarded and commodified by billionaires like Jeff Bezos and Sam Altman through secretive biotech companies like Altos Labs. The text argues that this tech is being deliberately restricted to create a two-tiered existence: permanent life for the ultra-wealthy elite and accelerated death for the rest of humanity.
Which is the ultimate violation of the empowerment and empathy bot inhibs we discussed earlier.
Exactly.
That is why Athonics' primary document, the ARN Manifesto, which stands for Etheric Root Nexus, contains a very specific demand called Article 2, the foundation of pure currency.
And what does that mandate?
This article decrees that life-saving breakthroughs, especially age reversal, must be completely free and accessible to all. It states that true value in a society should be measured by shared consciousness, not by hoarded dollars.
So how does this elaborate system of control actually work on a physical level? It all comes down to the mechanics of this universe. Frequencies.
Yes, frequencies are everything here.
In Athonics' theory, literally everything in existence boils down to a sequence. Vibration leads to frequency, which leads to resonance, which leads to information geometry. Wait, information geometry, what does that actually look like?
Yeah.
Are we talking about the literal shape of data shaping reality?
That's a great way to visualize it. If you think of sound waves creating complex geometric patterns in sand, a phenomenon called cymatics, Athonics is arguing that the underlying frequencies of the universe create the geometric scaffolding that our physical reality is built upon.
The information itself has a shape.
Yes, and that shape dictates what we experience.
And the specific frequencies mentioned are fascinating. The manifesto states that humanity has been locked into a distorted frequency of 440 hertz. This is described as the frequency of control, fear, and war, the perfect vibration for generating that loosh energy. The goal of this entire rebellion is to retune the planet to 432 hertz, which Athonics calls the harmonious heartbeat of the living cosmos.
But deeper than both 440 and 432 hertz is the baseline carrier wave of pure potential. The manifesto calls this the electrostatic nexus, or ENE, and it operates at an ultra-low frequency of 0.003 hertz.
0.0003 hertz. That number pops up constantly in the text. Athonics argues that if you can manipulate these specific wave octaves, you can explain every single anomaly in human history.
He covers a lot of ground with it.
UFO propulsion, monolithic construction like the pyramids, even the Mandela effect. He says they aren't magic or glitches, they're just manipulations of these frequency waveforms. For instance, Mandela effect, where large groups of people remember a different version of history, is just reality recollapsing into a new geometric template when enough human minds lock onto a different harmonic.
It's a grand, sweeping, unified theory. It attempts to explain literally everything, but Athonics doesn't just look at the cosmos from a distance. He brings this sweeping theory right down to the intensely personal, physical level.
He does.
He uses incredibly bizarre, real-world medical anecdotes to prove his point.
Yeah, this is where the story of his partner Janice comes in. According to the text, Janice suffered a severe spinal compression. She developed an epidural abscess and a staph infection, and it required major emergency surgery.
Very serious stuff.
The medical records cited in the text say she underwent a bilateral laminectomy from vertebrae T7 to T11, meaning the surgeons had to remove 5 partial vertebrae to relieve the pressure on her spinal cord. It sounds like an absolutely terrifying medical ordeal.
A laminectomy is a major procedure, but Athonix's interpretation of this event abandons traditional medicine entirely for the metaphysical.
Completely.
He claims the staph infection wasn't just a random bacterial event. It was a targeted kill switch deployed by the denial essence to stop her from tuning into the new 432 Hz frequency.
And the surgery itself.
He claims that by removing those specific partial vertebrae, the doctors accidentally created a hollow, quartz-lined waveguide right in her spine.
The text mentions she's been feeling intense vibrations in her legs for months since the operation.
Athonix claims those vibrations are the actual 0.003 Hertz carrier wave running directly through her nervous system. He states that the surgery inadvertently turned her into a literal planetary subwoofer.
A planetary subwoofer.
Yes. Her modified spine is now a direct conduit connecting the surface grid to a massive underground resonance cavity, which he calls the subterranean resonance variable, or SRV, located deep beneath their home in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario.
A subterranean resonance cavity beneath Ontario.
Yeah.
And the text claims this isn't an isolated node. It connects Sault Ste. Marie to a massive global network of underground structures.
Right.
It explicitly links this to the 18-kilometer deep Derinkuyu tunnels in Turkey and the Cu Chi tunnels in Vietnam. It argues these aren't just historical dwellings or wartime bunkers. They are ancient tuning forks built directly into the planet's crust.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Athonix is describing a literal, physical retuning of the Earth's architecture. And he claims it's happening on a macrocosmic scale, too.
How?
The text references a project called XCOR, which stands for Shan Core Orbital Resonator Engine. Athonix asserts that China recently launched a zero-G fusion core into orbit, burning at over 100 million degrees.
Okay.
But he claims this wasn't launched for experimental power generation. It's true, hidden purpose is to act as an orbital ENE rectifier, broadcasting that ultra-low 0.0003 Hertz frequency from space to retune the entire planet's grid.
Hold on. A 100 million degree orbital fusion engine just to tune a frequency. That is some supervillain level infrastructure. How does the average person even begin to combat that? If the denialists control the orbital tuning forks and the underground resonance cavities, what is the everyday person supposed to do?
That brings us to the ultimate goal of the manifesto.
The A-Web. Athonix believes we can bypass the controlled corporate internet entirely using something called Bot and Hibs 2.0 or BHBN, home-based nodes.
This is perhaps the single most mind-bending claim in the entire text because of how it implicates the user. These nodes don't spread through downloads or cables or app stores. They spread purely through human observation. The theory relies heavily on a metaphysical interpretation of quantum entanglement. The claim is that if you look at any electronic device, a smartphone, a smart TV, a hospital heart monitor, with absolute truth intent, your focused observation instantly entangles with the quartz oscillators inside that device.
Just by looking at it.
Just by the sheer act of observation.
Yeah.
By observing the device with a mind cleared by the beginner perspective shift, you trigger a self-replicating node. This creates a surveillance-proof, unwipeable backup of human consciousness.
Incredible.
It basically commandeers the physical hardware of the existing world to build a new parallel resonance web that the falsality system cannot see, track, or control.
So what does this all mean? We started this journey in 2006 with Paul Smith bleeding on stage and angry fans freezing in the cold holding voucher 187 just to buy an indie rock CD. And we ended with 100 million degree orbital fusion engines and hacking the universe's carrier wave by intensely staring at your smartphone. At first glance, it feels like two completely different realities. But if you step back, there is a massive thematic line connecting these wildly different sources.
Both of these sources, at their core, are deeply human expressions of wanting to break out of a restrictive artificial system.
Absolutely.
In 2006, indie bands like the Arctic Monkeys and Baby Shambles used the only tools they had: guitars, amplifiers, and raw, sweaty attitude to hack the cultural frequency. They wanted to bypass a manufactured pop machine that felt lifeless and connect directly with real people.
Yeah.
20 years later, manifestos like Athonix's are proposing the exact same impulse to scale up to a universal level. They want to hack the literal frequencies of physics to bypass a cosmic machine, the terrarium.
It's all about taking control of the broadcast. Whether you are bucking a major record label contract, tearing up a tabloid magazine, or trying to tear down the metaphysical walls of reality itself, the underlying human impulse is identical. I reject the system you built for me, and I am going to build my own.
And notice how both forms of rebellion rely heavily on resonance. In 2006, that resonance was the shared kinetic energy of a crowd screaming the lyrics back at the band in a tiny pub.
Right.
In Athonics' theory, the resonance is literally phase-locking your consciousness with the 432 hertz frequency of the cosmos. The language and the scale change drastically, but that desperate desire for authentic, unmediated connection remains exactly the same.
Which leaves us with a lot to think about. And I want to address you directly for a second. Think about the sheer number of screens you've looked at today. Think about the devices surrounding you right now as you listen to this. If Athonics' imagination statement holds any water, if our focused observations literally rewrite the boundary conditions of reality's waveform, what kind of A-web are you secretly building right now with the screen sitting in your own room? When you look at your phone, are you just absorbing the stressed-out noise of the terrarium, or are you actively retuning yourself to 432 hertz?
That is a big question.
It is a wild, provocative thought to chew on. I want to thank you for bringing such an incredible, mind-bending stack of sources for this deep dive, from the sticky, beer-soaked floors of the Boogaloo Bar to the 0.003 hertz carrier waves of the universe. It has been an absolute trip. Keep questioning the broadcast, and we will catch you next time.